Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that the Musicbed Challenge is back. This is an annual filmmaking competition with a huge share of $100,000 in prizes for the winners. And of course, they have an amazing panel of industry-leading judges. This year, you are going to have just 30 days to submit a film that fits into a narrative, spec ad, or documentary category. And all entrants have to use music from a pre-selected Musicbed playlist. Starter kits are available now. Submissions open April 12th and close May 10th. There's more details in the notes below, so jump to the link to see more on the judges and what the prizes are and get the starter kit right now. Today is going to be a question and answer episode, but before we get into that, you might be wondering why we took last week's episode down, which is probably my favorite episode that we've done in the last year, which is a breakdown of the story structure of Jurassic Park, which, as many of you know, is my favorite film of all time, the film that made me want to be a director. So I was really excited about this episode, but unfortunately, as soon as we put it up, it got a copyright claim on it, which demonetized it, which is totally fine by us. We've left up things that are demonetized all the time. However, it brick-walled the views for it as well, and we saw basically next to no views coming for the video, which means a lot of you weren't even getting notified that we put it out there. And given that it's an episode that we are so proud of and excited about, we decided to put it private until we got that resolved, and then we'll be putting it live again. I'm not 100% sure how long that's going to take. It could take up to 30 days because of how these things go, but it will go back up, but not until we get that situated.
And now, on with the show.
But now that I've said the thing that I just said, let's do a question. This question, in fact. What was the hardest lesson to learn as a filmmaker? I think for me, it was knowing when to be confident enough to collaborate with people I thought were incredibly talented. Because it's not until you start doing that you start working with people that you think are better than you, that you really start to get better rapidly. So I let insecurities hold me back from pulling the trigger on that and bringing in an excellent DP like Ryan Booth. And then once I started doing that, working with editors, working with these visual effects artists, working with amazing actors, they pulled me upwards in a faster pace than anything I had done before. So for me, it was that, just getting the confidence to just start collaborating with people that intimidate you. In your opinion, how does film stand out as an art form from other forms of art? Well, you have, music, you have poetry, you have novels, you have stage plays, you have all these different things that are kind of what come together to make a film. You have all these collections of art forms into one piece. Film can be a moving painting, and then with that audio-visual connection there, the level of poetry you can bring to it and meaning you can bring to it, I think is very different from other art forms. I don't think one is better than the other, but the reality that can also be brought to film, to show a day-to-day life, to look at someone's life, to add empathy, to put yourself in someone's shoes, I think those aspects are what make it set apart from anything else. To be able to come along in such a vivid way with a character, see through their eyes, experience their experience. I think that's really the biggest gift that film gives us that you do get from other art forms, but this really is heightened, I think. Would you still recommend DSLRs like the Canon T2i or the 5D Mark II or III for beginning filmmakers? And what is your take on prosumer cameras for filmmaking? I think whatever you have or have access to is the best camera for you to be using. I don't really think it matters, especially when you're first starting out. I've talked about plenty of times on the show that most of our cell phones are completely capable of really solid looking video. In fact, the most recent iPhones are just as good as a lot of the DSLRs you just mentioned in a lot of ways. I mean, features have been shot on those things. What matters most is really honing in what is the experience you're trying to give to your audience and how can you craft that. What it looks like will be completely forgiven by your audience if the content you're creating is engaging, compelling, and giving them an intended experience. So I wouldn't put a ton of attention on that when starting out. I would get what I'm able to get and what looks like the type of feel that I'm looking for out of an image. But more than anything else, you really should be focusing in on how you can hone your story and character. I'm in college and I've got a short film I want to make. I want to spend the proper time in pre-production to create the world I want. But with school, I'm busy with a lot of other things. How do you figure out when to stop worrying about out prep time and actually shoot the story. I'm worried I'll keep pushing it off for time's sake. For me, with pre-production, it's always been a matter of this is how much time I have. When we do a short film, we've gotten our budgets from partners, which means there's a deadline for when this thing goes out, which means there's a deadline for when we need to start shooting the thing, which means I have X amount of time to do it, which is exactly what it's like in Hollywood. All of my friends that I know that have prep films get X amount of time that's been budgeted for prep. So here's the allotted time you have till you're making the film. So I would give yourself a time frame to when you need to be shooting this thing and just stick to that. You're in school now, you're experimenting, you're figuring things out. You're not gonna make your greatest film right now. What you really want to be focusing on is making as many things as you possibly can and putting your heart and soul into each and every one, because every single one that you do is gonna be like a little film school for you. You're gonna learn a ton of stuff. So focus on getting it done. Set yourself a shoot date and stick to that. Prep as much as you can until then, but get it done. What's 2 things in your current workflow when making Film Riot that you would like to improve but currently struggle with? I don't have 2 things, but I do have one, and that would be sort of, I guess, the organization of how we do Film Riot. If we could get a better workflow to it all. We have our workflow, but it's really always on its toes and always in the moment, which I do like to some degree, and we have done purposefully to keep ourselves on our toes and keep the show feeling like it's on its toes. And it is sort of the nature of what we do, because every week it's something different, some sort of new effect or new technique that we're going to show. Oftentimes we either need to learn it or practice it, try it out once before we actually make it. So there's a whole process to it weekly that keeps us sort of up against the wire every week, but makes it harder to spread out and do bigger and different things. So that's something that we're still trying to wrap our head around. And I guess for a second thing, if I were to throw one in, just more people, more filmmakers, more voices in here doing different creative out of the box thing, which is something we are also working toward, but that means more budget. So it's all stuff that we're always working toward that direction, but haven't hit quite yet. Last question is, what is a good move to get out of a creative rut? To be honest, this is a pretty timely question for me because I have been in one lately, and I think mine was brought on by a very different thing. You have writer's block, and we all have experienced different versions of that, but I've had a creative block out of, I think, just frustration with the industry, how things go. I've been pitching for a while now, and you get passed on quite a bit, and every time you get passed on, it feels like a personal rejection because you are putting your heart and soul into every story you develop, every pitch that you give. It means something to you. So when you give it to them, you are giving a bit of a piece of yourself to someone, and then they take that piece and they treat it like it's meaningless, and then they just say no unceremoniously and move on. So you're left with this very weird feeling that's not great. And I found after a while of that, it did create a bit of a rut for me. I feel like my guess is that it felt like, why put more work in if it's not gonna go anywhere? So I talked to a lot of creative friends who have been through the same sort of thing, and that's been one of the biggest helps for me. Saying it out loud to people, just talking it out, talking to like-minded creatives to get their experience, what they feel like, to be encouraged in that way. Read stuff, watch stuff, write something completely random that's nothing that you're doing, that there's no expectation to go anywhere or to become anything, and it probably won't. You just write a paragraph of anything at all that you want, even just what this room looks and feels like to you, and just work in that way of like creative rehabilitation. And that's kind of brought me back to the thing, reshaping your mind, reminding yourself that you're not entitled to anyone's time, you're not entitled to anyone's yes, you're not entitled to ever make it in this industry, but what you can do is keep making the thing that you love, whether anyone likes it or not. And if that is fulfilling enough to you, you'll get out of that creative rut and just keep making things because it's just a part of you, and that's all that matters. But that's it for today. Again, we do have that Jurassic Park episode that is coming out. I'm really excited about this episode, so I'm excited for you guys to see it once it has the clamps off of it, but we'll keep you updated on when that's coming. So follow us on all our social media channels and you'll see when that's coming. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.